Hello, and welcome to the Thin End of the Wedge, the podcast where experts from around the world share new and interesting stories about life in the ancient Middle East. My name's John. Each episode I talk to friends and colleagues and get them to explain their work in a way we can all understand. Today we move east for our first visit to Iran. We travel back 2,500 years to the time of Darius the Great, ruler of the Persian Achaemenid Empire. Under Darius, Persian rule stretched from India as far west as Eastern Europe, engulfing the ancient Middle East. Darius celebrated his successes by creating a monument high above the road between the great capital cities of Babylon in Iraq and Ecbatana in Iran. Nowadays, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The words of the great king still echo loudly today. They form the text carved into cuneiform's equivalent of the Rosetta Stone, Behistun. Our guest has spent many years examining the monument. He's photographed it extensively and shared his photos with the world. He's painstakingly reconstructed the text of one of the three languages into which the inscription was copied. His work introduces us to several ideas: the importance of working with original sources, the relationship between technology and scholarship, and the value of looking again at even the best-known objects. A fresh pair of eyes can often bring new insights. Our guest has been working with the most stubborn of Behistun three languages, the one called Elamite. This was the language of a group that lived in western Iran. Since records began many centuries earlier, the history of the Elamites had been inextricably linked with that of their Mesopotamian neighbours. Now power had passed from the Elamite dynasties to the Persians, but their language retained prestige and was still used as the main language of administration. So get yourself a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable, and let's meet today's guest. Hello, and welcome to Thin End of the Wedge. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, and thank you very much for your inviting me.
Could you tell us, please, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Saber Amiri Parian. I am an independent scholar who work on the Elamite version of the Behistun inscription. For about 10 years, I have been working on the Elamite texts and especially about the Achaemenid era. I am working on the Elamite version of the Behistun inscription.
Your work centres on Behistun. That's a name that everyone who's ever studied the ancient Middle East will know very well indeed. But it's not as well known as it deserves to be more generally. Could you start by telling us what and where Behistun is, please? And why is it so important?
First of all, I tell you about the Behistun monument. The Behistun monument was created by Darius the Great, the Achaemenid king, the Persian Empire king, in the late 6th century BC to commemorate his victories over the rebellious kings and establishing his empire through the ancient Near East. It is located near Kermanshah in western Iran and contains a number of reliefs. Relief of the king, his two courtiers, relief of Gaumata the Magus or Smerdis lying under Darius' feet, and relief of 9 seized kings, owned by Rome, were standing in a line in front of Darius. Surrounding them are several trilingual inscriptions. They are written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. What's noticeable to mention is that the monument has been carved on a huge cliff high up on the Mount Behistun in a gorge. It is overlooking the ancient road connecting Babylon in Mesopotamia or modern Iraq to Ecbatana, the capital of Media in Iran. One can describe the Behistun inscription as Darius' declaration to future people, representing his res gesta of the early years of his reign. The Behistun inscription had a key role in decipherment of the cuneiform scripts and reading the enormous cuneiform texts found throughout the Near East. Its role in establishing the field of Assyriology shouldn't be neglected. It contains the largest cuneiform texts written on stone. By deciphering its cuneiform texts, Assyriologists accessed a sheer bulk of the sites with their phonetic values, an index so that they used in order to decipher other cuneiform texts. In fact, the Behistun inscription should be considered as an Achaemenid masterpiece which they placed on a huge cliff inaccessible to people, to be achieved by scholars thousands of years later. Its role is same as the Rosetta Stone for the decipherment of hieroglyphs.
Why are there 3 languages used in this monument?
Well, for the first time, Achaemenids created trilingual inscriptions, written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, as 3 versions of an original text. Behistun is the largest one. In fact, your questions lead us to find the answer to the question why Achaemenids left such trilingual inscriptions. In order to answer these questions, one must consider the synchronicity of the Achaemenid Empire with the languages written in cuneiform. Babylon was one of the capital of the empire, and at that time the Babylonian cuneiform had a long history. In the south of Iran, where the Achaemenids settled in later, the civilization of Elam had been established before, and also Susa was one of the capitals of the Achaemenids. The Elamite languages also wrote in cuneiform. Thousands of clay tablets found in Persepolis substantiated that the Elamite was the official language in the Achaemenid court in Persepolis and Susa. On the other hand, Old Persian was the vernacular language of the Achaemenids, and they invented a cuneiform script to write its relevant texts. Therefore, you see that 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, appears in the trilingual inscriptions. They should be considered as royal inscriptions, and it seems that Behistun inscription is the first one left by Achaemenids. You know that first Old Persian languages was deciphered by some scholars, same as Grotefend before Rawlinson. And Rawlinson in the 19th century completed the decipherment of the Old Persian, and later on, of course, some other scholars continued his methods to complete them. Old Persian was written in the cuneiform that seems simpler than the 2 others, and its decipherment was easier than 2 others, because Old Persian has the same root as the other languages, same as Avestan and Sanskrit, and belong to Indo-European language. Then, when Old Persian languages and Old Persian texts was deciphered, it opened a way to compare their correspondences in other 2 texts in Elamite and Babylonian languages. And by comparing the correspondences, Assyriologists became enabled to decipher the 2 other texts.
We find 2 names used for the monument, Behistun and Behistun. Which one should we be using?
Both names come from the name Behistun, that it is ancient name, which appears in the Greeks as Behistanon. Today, both names are used to refer to the inscriptions and the mountain. In some Islamic sources, the name Behistun is mentioned in reference to the mountain and the monument. The modern name Behistun or Behistun is a popular transformation of the name Behistun, and nowadays is translated as without column in Persian. Behistun means place without column. Personally, I prefer using Behistun because the name Behistun has well preserved the form of old name Pakistan or Behistun. We know that some pioneers, same as Rawlinson, used Behistun in their records.
Every description of Behistun will detail the work of European travellers and scholars of the 18th and 19th centuries. But Behistun is a very large monument, carved in a place designed to be seen. What local knowledge existed about Behistun before the European travellers?
Behistun is related to Achaemenid memories. Unfortunately, there haven't been any real information about the Behistun, who created the monument and who was the king that created Behistun among the Iranians. Iranians, unfortunately, hadn't been aware of the real history of the Achaemenids. Their base story was some legends written in such books like Shahnameh. And in that sources, you will not see any information about the real history, such as Achaemenids or, for example, Medes Empire. The discovery, the real history of ancient Persia or ancient Iran is owed to the effort of some scholars, such as Rawlinson. I am in debt of Rawlinson. Rawlinson was an officer who was employed in Iran, and he could achieve the inscription and make the first study of its cuneiform text. Before Rawlinson, of course, we know that some scholars would travel to Iran, for example, Carsten Niebuhr from Denmark. They copied the inscriptions and they took a copy of the inscriptions to Europe, and then some scholars such as Grotefend studied them and could decipher such of the cuneiform signs. But we know that Behistun contains a line texts, and this line text is significant and for the extracting terms, extracting grammar of an ancient language. For example, regarding to Elamite, regarding to Babylon. Despite of the researches by prior scholars, Rawlinson could definitely solve the problem of the cuneiform texts. When the Iranian people hear the news, they gradually inform about the real history of Iran. And then they became enthusiastic to know more about it.
Behistun has been known for a long time, and many translations of it have been published. So why is new work needed?
Despite the high position of the inscription that have made inaccessible to human damage, natural elements such as streams of water over the inscription, or tufa deposits, or water with calcareous compounds have severely suffered it. In same parts, the cuneiform signs are partially visible at best. In some others, they have been completely illegible. Moreover, position of the inscription has made close observation and copying of its texts difficult. We know that, aside from Henry Rawlinson, who for the first time copied the cuneiform texts between 1836 and 1844, only on a few occasions have scholars copied and examined the inscription. Assyriologists have employed methods that are dated today, such as drawing of signs, paper or latex impressions, or photography with old cameras. The copies provided by such methods are not accurate and don't represent the idiosyncrasies or imperfections of the original engraving. Those copies have previously been used by Assyriologists in order to prepare their editions. Therefore, previous transliterations used doubtful readings. It should be mentioned that the most of the published editions were not accompanied by photographs or even a hand copy, unfortunately. In the main source, King and Thompson's edition in 1907, the cuneiform signs are typed in standard shapes, and they don't represent the original engravings too. Therefore, in order to prepare an improved edition, it is necessary to have new copies of inscription which clarify more details. Of course, in recent years, laser scanning of the inscription was carried out under the auspices of the Behistun Cultural Heritage Center. This project is very important and necessary and would give us very significant information about the Behistun. Unfortunately, I haven't had access to these copies, and I have photographs with my own camera.
What's the nature of the work that you've been doing?
Since 2013, I have been conducting a research on the Elamite version of the Behistun inscription. The Elamite version has got intense damages as well. Its considerable portions have been illegible today, partially in its first and its third columns. According to current references, one must rely on the King and Thompson edition in 1907 to do research on the whole inscription. Moreover, the base of other editions such as Griou, Suzini, and Lava in 1993 or François Valla in 1977 are not based on an accurate copy of the Elamite version. Unfortunately, no accurate copies of the version have been available, and Edwin Norris's plate provided in 1855 are both dated and in error. The Elamite version of the Behistun inscription has got the longest Elamite texts ever found, and it's written in 3 large columns. Since the Elamite is an extinct language, like Sumerian, with no known linguistic relatives, it is significant to research on such a long text. In my numerous close visits of the inscription, I have taken many photographs and measured its dimensions, particularly of the Elamite. Then I have analyzed the photographs, and using Photoshop, I have scaled the surface of the columns and marked grid lines on them so that space between each 2 grid lines is equal to 1 centimeter. By examining them and comparing with other detailed photographs, then collating prior editions, I have tried to restore the damaged signs and using Photoshop, match them to traces or fill the gaps. Ultimately, I have prepared a new edition of the whole Elamite version.
What are your most important results?
I have produced autographs of the Elamite version. The autograph of its first and the second columns have been posted onto CDLI, and I have submitted my photo too. I think the prior copies will be replaced by mine. In addition, I have worked on the photographs and determined the restorations through them. These images are so that they represent the real image of current situation of the original engravings and my restorations on photographs. The results of my research are accessible as 2 articles. These articles represent my new editions of the first and the second columns of the Elamite version, as well as interpretation of new readings. I will prepare this article on the third column soon. I should mention that my work yielded some new suggestions for prior readings. and I substantiated that some prior registrations or some prior readings should be replaced with new readings.
What are your plans for the future?
There are many questions regarding the Behistun. Many of them are still unanswered. I know that I will get involved in some of them, and my enthusiasm will press me to do research on them. One of them is about interpretation of the 70th paragraph of the Old Persian version. This paragraph is about preparing an Old Persian copy written both on clay and leather, then sending them through the nations under the Achaemenid Empire. It is controversial for scholars whether Darius implies the invention of the Old Persian scripts or not. Another plan is to do research on the old Elamite version of the Behistun inscription. To the right of the reliefs in the Behistun, there existed damaged Elamite inscription written in 4 columns. A part of its first columns was completely erased in order to make room for the relief of the captured second Kha. And then the other remaining columns were chisels by engravers by the order of Darius. We know that later its copy was written in 3 large columns, which is the Babylonian version. This later copy is the same that is known as the Elamite version, and it is the same version I have researched on. Unfortunately, there hasn't existed any published transliteration of the old Elamite version. However, it is expected that its context has some differences in phrases or even sentences compared to the newer Elamite version. I have planned to do research like the research I have done on the newer Elamite one, and photograph it in detail and work on the photograph and prepare the first transliteration in order to be published later.
So the idea is that traces left behind of the old version might fill in gaps in the new version where the surface is damaged or obscured, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, of course, I have several photographs of the older Elamite version. And if you look at these images and examine them, you will see that the tips of the wedge are visible. Although engraver chisels heavily the inscription, the traces of wedges could be found by examining. And this helped me in some phrases in the newer version. The older Elamite version helped me. I could find even the traces, for example, the sentences are written in the newer Elamite version, and then I could trace this in the older Elamite one. And with finding the traces on the older Elamite versions, I could restore the terms in the newer Elamite version that has been wholly damaged.
Do Iranian children learn about Behistun at school?
Generally, yes. They get informed about the monument and the inscription. However, they don't learn professionally about Behistun. But fortunately, a number of books have been published in Persian that contains comprehensive information about Behistun. Persian translation of the Behistun inscriptions are available today and easily can be found on the internet. And in many sources and books are available. And you know that the Persian translation, of course, are based on the Old Persian. And you know that the other 2 versions, Babylonian and Elamite, has some differences in sentences or phrases. And unfortunately, the Elamite and the Babylonian translation are scaled in Persian sources. But since my Persian translation is on my own reading of the inscription, it is more accurate than the other translations that could be found on internet.
Is Behistun a popular tourist attraction? Do families visit the site, for example?
Yes, absolutely. There is a tendency among the Iranian families to visit the site because the inscription is famous enough, such as Persepolis. I think even if families have not visited the site, they have eager to have information about it. Fortunately, Behistun is famous and has good reputation in Iran. It is so that you will see it as an attractive monument in Iran.
Cuneiform is taught in relatively few universities, and in most of those centres the focus is on Sumerian and particularly the Akkadian language. Elamite is rarely taught. What's the situation in Iran at the moment? Is Elamite more widely taught there?
Unfortunately, no. It is a great shortcoming that the field of Assyriology haven't been established in Iranian universities. The resources of cuneiform texts are very scarce, unfortunately, and therefore very few people have sought to study the Elamite languages in Iran. Of course, let me say that recently Abdulmajid Arfai, the Assyriologist in Tehran, has studied a number of the Elamite fortification tablets found in Persepolis and published his results as 3 books in Persian. I hope such publications would be effective in promulgating the subject of the Elamite among the Iranian students or Iranian peoples who are interested to learn or research on the Elamite texts in future.
How can we follow your work?
Generally, I upload my published works as articles onto my academia. There is a list of my articles and you can click on them in order to download them. Also, I try to announce any news regarding my works about the Behistun via Twitter and Facebook. If anyone has Twitter or Facebook, he can find my page and then see any of my news. Also, there is an opportunity in my web pages about giving any idea about the Behistun. I will appreciate any opinions or any ideas or any comments regarding Behistun inscription.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank our patrons, Tyler Russell, Enrique Jimenez, Haida Orakabi, Jana Matuszak, Nancy Hycock, JC, Runa Rattenborg, Wood Thrush, and Elisa Rosberger. I really appreciate your support. It makes a big difference. And thank you for listening to Thin End of the Wedge. If you enjoy what we do, please consider supporting us via Patreon. That's patreon.com/wedgepod. Even a couple of pounds a month helps keep the podcast going and brings us closer to the point where we can make proper translations into Middle Eastern languages. You can also support us in other ways. Simply subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. Recommend us to your friends. Follow us on Twitter @wedge_pod. If you want the latest podcast news, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can find all the links in the show notes and on our website at wedgepod.org. wedgepod.org. Thanks, and I hope you'll join us next time.